Discover the heartwarming truth. 7 incredible car brands on the brink of extinction, hiding amazingly in our own backyards. In the quaint town of Maplewood, a place where cherry blossoms bloom and kids ride bikes down tree-lined streets, Jim Harper's garage stood as more than just a place for fixing cars. It hummed with the dreams and struggles of the community. A sanctuary not only for engines, but for stories. His life's work pulsed with the spirit of the town. With his rugged hands and heart as big as the wide-open highway, Jim was a mechanic of not just metal but of human connection. He poured his soul into every job, from oil changes to full restorations, breathing life back into rusted parts. Yet, in the shadows loomed a threat. Corporate heads eyed Jim's beloved garage with dollar signs in their eyes, eager to pave over years of history for shiny new developments. The thought twisted in Jim's gut. Could he let go of the legacy his father had built? He stood behind his workbench, a familiar wrench in hand, heart heavy with the thought of impending loss. This garage wasn't just where he worked, it was where friendships flourished, where kids learned to ride, and where memories were forged. One day, while sorting through dusty old files in the attic, Jim stumbled upon a treasure, a collection of stories about classic American car brands. Pontiac, Saturn, brands that evoked memories of drive-in movies, summer road trips, and nights under the stars. They were on the brink of extinction, just like his garage. And just like those brands, Jim felt a calling. Each story taught him resilience, loyalty, and the importance of community. They made him remember his first car, a rusted-out beauty his dad had lovingly restored with him on long summer nights. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the deadline looming, Jim found his spirit rekindled. He shared his plans with the community, sparking excitement about a town-wide event, a fundraiser to breathe life into both his garage and the dying car brands. Faces lit up during town meetings, where voices filled with passion roared in agreement. They shared tearful stories and laughter, reweaving bonds fraying at the edges, channeling their collective determination. As he sat amidst them, Jim felt the warmth of hope rising like fresh engine oil. But just when he thought they were united, the cracks began to show. Past grievances surfaced, those old wounds that made some neighbors bitter and divided. The tension swept through the room like a gust of wind, threatening to tear apart the fragile web of connection they had just begun to rebuild. Would his dream of saving the garage and their community spirit slip through his fingers? And then it hit him like a runaway tire. Could he mend these fractures? Could his unwavering spirit forge a new path forward amidst the discord? As Jim stood on the brink of his battle, hope flickered in his chest like a dying battery. The future of not just his garage, but the heart of Maplewood, hung in the balance. What would he do next? The answer held the key to everything. The evening air was thick with tension, a heavy blanket that seemed to settle over the gathering in the town hall. Jim looked around at the faces of his friends and neighbors. Some were lit with determination, while others were shrouded in doubt. It was a mixture that mirrored the clashing emotions within him. As the tension rose, Jim took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Listen," he said, pulling the microphone closer. "We've all been through a lot together, and yes, there are disagreements. But this is about more than just a garage or a few old car brands. It's about us, our community, our history." He watched as some heads nodded in agreement, while others remained still, lost in their own thoughts. The shadows in the room seemed darker now, filled with memories of past disputes and hurt feelings. "What if," he continued, his voice steadied by newfound resolve, "we use this fundraiser to heal, to bring some of these old divisions into the light? We could hold car shows, bake sales, even competitions." A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. Ellen, a neighbor from across the street, spoke up. "Jim, you know about the car shows we used to have? They brought so many of us together. We could rekindle that spirit." Encouraged, Jim felt a spark of hope. "Exactly. Let us celebrate our histories, not just auto brands. We can tell our stories. Make this a celebration of who we are, our families, our struggles, our victories. Every car has a story, just like every one of us. One by one, people began to share their memories with cars that had meant something to them. Laughter bubbled up when Frank recalled trying to impress a girl in his old Camaro, only to have it backfire on him, causing more embarrassment than charm. It sparked a wave of stories, an emotional tide that washed through the crowd, mingling humor with nostalgia. Tears glistened, not just from sadness, but from the joy of connection. But amidst the warmth, uneasy glances remained. The rifts that had formed in their community were still there, bubbling under the surface. Jim could feel the weight of unspoken words, the hesitation of those too hurt or too proud to mend fences. "Want to get through this," he said, sincerity bleeding through his words. "We need more than just cars and memories. We need unity. If we're going to do this, we have to address the past. It's the only way forward." Silence fell over the room again, thick and heavy, as everyone pondered his words. Could they really conquer their past? The skepticism hung palpably, like oil dancing on water, waiting to settle. Just as Jim thought hope was slipping through his fingers, a voice rose soft but steady. "Maybe we start small, like sharing a meal." It was Mary, another neighbor, her eyes glistening. "Potluck style. Each of us brings a dish and a story. We can bond over food, and maybe it will help." Encouragement threaded through the crowd, the murmurs of support growing stronger. Jim felt the pulse of anticipation in the air, like the rev of engines ready to unleash their power. As plans began to take shape, Jim felt a warmth spreading through him, an inkling of what might be possible. But deep inside, a flicker of doubt remained. Would this be enough to mend the rifts? With their next meeting set, Jim stepped outside into the cool, calming nighttime air. The shadows of the town loomed large, and for a moment, he felt like he was being watched. As he glanced back toward the neon-lit garage, an unsettling feeling clung to him. What if there were bigger forces at play, not just within the community, but aimed at breaking it apart entirely? As he sensed something lurking just beyond his peripheral vision, Jim couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge was only just beginning. With the stakes rising, he needed to be ready. Could he protect the heart of Maplewood from threats yet unseen? The uncertainty loomed, daring him to uncover what lay beyond the shadows. The following days were a whirlwind for Jim. Each morning, the sun would rise slowly, illuminating Maplewood's streets, yet his heart felt heavy. The excitement from the town meeting quickly faded into a nagging anxiety about the potluck. Would people really come? Would old grudges surface over a shared meal? He spent hours in his own kitchen, cooking up a classic family recipe, his mom's famous chili. The comforting aroma filled the air, a stark contrast to the feelings swirling in his chest. As he chopped onions and stirred the pot, each slice felt like a small step toward reconciliation. He could picture the faces of his neighbors, some smiling, some hesitant. What stories would be shared? The evening of the potluck arrived, casting its own magic over Maplewood. Twinkling fairy lights wrapped around trees, and laughter echoed down the streets. Jim stood at the entrance of the town hall, his heart racing. Each person he greeted carried a dish, a story, and the weight of their past with them. Ellen arrived with a tray piled high with brownies. "You remember these from the bake sales?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. Jim nodded, recalling the old times and the community connection they once had. Slowly, more folks filtered in. Some were familiar faces, while others were neighbors he barely knew. There was a tension in the air, a charged anticipation, yet Jim hoped it would melt away with the warm scents wafting through the hall. As everyone settled at the long table, Jim took a deep breath. "Thank you all for coming. We all have something to bring to this community, just like these dishes. Let us not just share food, but let's share who we are. Maybe we can remember what connects us, not what divides us." The first few bites were filled with silence, but then Mary took a chance. "I brought potato salad. My mom used to make it every 4th of July. It never tasted the same without Uncle Ted's jokes." The table erupted in laughter, easing the tension as stories spilled out. She had opened the door, and soon, it swung wide open. Jim watched as Frank stood so others could see him over the table. "Okay, I'll go next. My dad had this old rusty truck, and every Saturday, we'd take it out to the drive-in. That thing barely made it half a mile, but it never failed to bring smiles." One by one, stories wove a rich tapestry of memories. There were stories of heartbreak and loss, but also tales of triumph and hope. Tears were shed, and laughter mixed with calls for seconds. The air, once thick with doubt, turned light as connections rekindled. But just as he began to feel that sense of community return, he noticed a figure lingering by the door. Dressed in a dark coat and partially hidden in shadows, the stranger watched with an intensity that made Jim's gut twist. Who was this? What did they want? He tried to shake off the unease, focusing on the laughter and warmth surrounding him. Yet in the back of his mind, a sense of foreboding grew. As the evening wound down and plates emptied, Jim's heart was hopeful. They had started to heal the rifts, hadn't they? But he couldn't forget that figure, still watching, still waiting. When the evening ended, and the last laugh echoed through the hall, Jim stepped outside. The shadows danced as he glanced back at the gathering, bursting with newfound spirit. Yet there, still hidden, was the stranger. What did they know about Maplewood? What threat were they posing? As the wind rustled through the trees, a chill crawled up Jim's spine. The potluck brought some connection back, but a new darkness hovered at the edges. Was healing enough to stand against whatever came next? He could feel the stakes rising like a heartbeat, pulsing, insistent that he turned to head home, ready to confront whatever challenge awaited him. Jim knew one thing: this was only the beginning. The next morning, Jim awoke to a bright sun filtering through his curtains. The chirping of birds should have felt like music, but instead, it only heightened the tension still coiled in his gut. He had spent a restless night tossing and turning, haunted by the image of the stranger lingering in the shadows. He trudged into the kitchen, the familiar scent of yesterday's chili still hanging in the air, but now tinged with worry. Pouring himself a cup of coffee, he tried to shake off the unease. The potluck had felt like a step forward for Maplewood, but now, it was overshadowed by the unknown. Who was that stranger, and why did their presence threaten the spark of connection that had begun to ignite? As he sipped his coffee, a knock echoed through his small home. Jim hesitated. His heart raced at the thought of facing the stranger. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. It wasn't he, the stranger, but Ellen, beaming with what looked like a plate of leftover brownies. "Thought I'd bring these by before I dive into the work week," she said, her smile infectious. It was always easy to feel lighter in her presence. "Thanks, Ellen. Just the pick-me-up I needed," he replied, returning her smile, though the weight was still there, pressing down hard. "Have you talked to anyone else about the potluck?" "Everyone seemed to really enjoy themselves," she continued, stepping inside. The warmth of their shared laugh brought a flicker of hope, but his mind spiraled back to the shadowy figure. "I haven't tea. I just can't shake the feeling that something's off." "Did you notice anyone strange at the meeting?" he asked, hoping to share his concern. Ellen frowned, her brow knitting together. "I didn't tea, but with everything that's been happening in town, it's bound to bring out mixed emotions. Remember how things were after the factory closed? People had to find new ways to connect, and sometimes that made them turn against each other." Her words hit home. He remembered the division that had lingered for years after the factory's demise. The potluck was meant to heal, not deepen wounds. But now, he felt the inklings of fear creep back in. What if that stranger is someone connected to the old resentments? What if they're planning something? He muttered, the coffee mug trembling slightly as he set it down on the table. "That's a possibility. But," she said, her voice firm, "you can't let that overshadow the progress we made. People are eager to connect again. We can't let fear win." Jim wanted to believe her. He truly did. But the stranger's eyes, filled with intensity and maybe something darker, lingered in his mind like a ghost. Suddenly, a faint memory flashed, a story he had heard about the factory's closure, of tensions unchecked. The more he thought of it, the more he became convinced there was a connection. Perhaps this stranger wasn't simply an onlooker, but someone deeply rooted in those past wounds. "I need to find out who they are," he finally said, the resolve rooting deep in his heart. Ellen regarded him closely, unyielding. "Just be careful, Jim. When digging into the past, the truth can cut deeper than you expect." As she left, Jim felt both encouraged and apprehensive. He knew he needed to gather his thoughts and maybe even reach out to others for help. Who in Maplewood knew anything about the stranger lurking in the corners of their community? With a new sense of purpose brewing inside him, he set out. It was time to discover the heart of the mystery, but he could feel the shadows creeping closer. What would he uncover, and at what cost? As he stepped out onto the street, a sense of foreboding loomed. The air felt thick with unanswered questions. Would the town truly unite against whatever threat was coming, or would it unravel once more? Determined, he moved forward, his heart pounding. Today would be about finding answers, and the dark figure in the shadows would not escape his search for the truth. The sun hung high in the sky as Jim walked through Maplewood, determination fueling every step. The streets felt eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the vibrant chatter that usually filled the air. He waved to a few neighbors, but their smiles seemed hesitant, wary. Did they sense the tension? Did they feel the weight of uncertainty that he was carrying? Jim's first stop was the old community center. It had always been a gathering place for the townspeople, a nook of familiarity amidst change. He hoped to find some of the regulars there, perhaps share his concerns and get a better grasp on this unsettling situation. Pushing the heavy door open, a wave of cool air brushed against him. The faint scent of wood polish and cleaning supplies greeted him, mixed with whispers of laughter echoing from the past. He walked down the narrow hallway, each step leading him closer to the main room. There, he spotted Ruth, the town's librarian. She was hunched over a table, surrounded by stacks of books and paperwork. Her glasses perched at the end of her nose. She barely noticed when he approached. "Hey, Ruth," he said softly, trying to keep the mood light despite the cloud above him. She looked up, her eyes brightening, but concern quickly washed over her face. "Jim, what brings you here? You look like you've seen a ghost." He chuckled nervously. "In a way, I might have. I've been thinking about the potluck, about that stranger. Do you know anything about them?" Ruth's face went pale. "I did see someone lurking at the edge of the gathering. Didn't he think much of it at the time?" She paused, as though weighing her words. "But I've heard some whispers, Jim. Things that might put that figure in a deeper context." His pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "There are stories about someone who used to work at the factory. Someone who lost everything, friends, family, and more. They've been keeping to themselves after the closure, but now rumors are surfacing. Some say they're intent on revenge, blaming the town for their lost life." Jim's heart raced. The fragments of history he had once brushed aside now felt tangible, like jagged pieces of a puzzle waiting to fit together. "You think this stranger might be connected?" Ruth nodded slowly. "It's possible. But remember, Jim, not every ghost is out for revenge. Sometimes they seek understanding." Her words hung in the air like a prayer, a glimmer of hope amidst his rising fears. He needed to know more. Time was crucial. Jim took a deep breath, fueled by his burning desire to protect his community and those he cared about. "What do I do?" he asked urgently. "Dig deeper," Ruth advised, her voice steady. "Talk to others. Collect their stories. If this person is tied to the past, we may be able to help them find some peace before they become a danger." Determined, Jim left the community center with newfound purpose. The sun felt warmer against his skin, though the clouds still loomed in his heart. He remembered Ellen's words about not letting fear win. Yet, what if he discovered something darker than he imagined? What if his meddling only incited further chaos? As he walked through the streets, he spotted several familiar faces, faces he knew might have more information. With each step, his resolve strengthened. Blurred edges of his mind began to clarify into a singular focus. Someone in Maplewood had a story to tell, a feeling to express. But as he approached a small group, he felt it again, the unsettling sensation that eyes were upon him. Glancing over his shoulder, he caught sight of a figure standing at the corner. The shadows lengthened as the figure's presence tightened the air around him. Was it the stranger? His heart quickened. Was he ready to confront what lay behind those eyes? With unsteady legs, Jim took his first step toward unearthing the truth, but could he handle the revelations that awaited him? Jim swallowed hard, every instinct in him screaming to turn back. But curiosity, the same force that had propelled him towards the community center, urged him forward. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he approached the shadowy figure. As he got closer, the figure stepped into a patch of sunlight, and Jim recognized her. It was Lily, a name steeped in whispered tales around town. Years ago, she'd been a vibrant part of Maplewood's fabric, always smiling, always ready to help others. But after the factory closed, rumors claimed she spiraled into isolation. Her hair, once a brilliant brown, was now a tangled mess of dull strands, her clothes hanging loosely on her frail frame. Before he could speak, Lily's eyes locked onto his. They glistened with a mix of defiance and sorrow, like storm clouds ready to burst. "You're not here for a friendly chat, Jim. You're here about the stranger, aren't you?" Jim was taken aback. "I want to know what's going on. About you, about the stories." She took a step back, her body tense. "Stories? You mean the ones people spin when they're afraid?" He held his ground, not wanting to scare her away. "I think there's a lot of pain behind those stories. I just want to help. We all do." But her laughter was sharp, cutting through the air between them. "Help? Do you even know what happened to me? What happened to us?" Jim was quiet, grappling with her words. "I want to understand." Lily's expression softened just a fraction, as though he had reached a corner of her heart long hidden. "Understanding can hurt, Jim. You might not like what you find. Maybe I need to know. Regardless," he said, surprising himself with his own conviction. With a sudden shake of her head, she whispered, "Then follow me." They walked to a shaded bench under an old oak tree, its branches swaying lightly in the breeze. The quietness of the world around them felt heavy, a blend of anticipation and fear. "People think I'm bitter, that I want revenge," she said tightly. "But no one knows the real story. I didn't lose just a job. I lost my family. I lost my purpose." Jim noticed the tremor in her voice, the way it cracked like fragile glass. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "We didn't realize I didn't know." "Why would you?" "You all moved on, while I was left picking up the pieces of a shattered life," she replied, eyes narrowing at the gathering clouds of his intentions. Her pain was palpable, grinding against Jim's heart. "What can I do to help bridge that gap?" he asked hesitantly. Lily looked at him, really looked at him, as if searching for something. "A flicker of hope? You want to help? Hold a town meeting. Let everyone share their truth, their stories. That is how healing begins." The idea struck him like lightning. It was bold, maybe reckless, but it felt right. Maybe it could start breaking down the walls that had formed around them all. "I'll do it," he promised, determination blooming within him. As he rose from the bench, he felt the weight of the task settling around him. He had to rally the town, to encourage them to face what they feared the most. But as they turned to leave, a shadow crossed his mind. Would Maplewood respond with compassion for its lost, or would they brandish their fear as a weapon? Before he could voice those doubts, Lily grasped his arm firmly. "Remember, Jim, healing needs courage. Are you ready for what might unfold?" With a nod, he felt a sense of urgency thrumming in his veins. "I'll make the meeting happen," he affirmed. But as they walked back together, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the stranger's story was more intertwined with his plans than he had realized. Could he uncover the truth without awakening a storm? The air hummed with energy, as if the very ground beneath their feet was alive with the stories waiting to be told. Jim returned home that evening with a swirling mix of emotions. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden hues along the streets of Maplewood. It all felt surreal. He could hardly wrap his mind around the gravity of Lily's words or the task he had taken on. There was a tension in the air, a promise of change he both craved and feared. That he paced in the kitchen, glancing out the window, where shadows lengthened under the fading light. The meeting. It was essential, yet he couldn't shake the feeling of dread crawling up his spine. What if no one showed? What if they did, but all he found was anger and blame? As he stood by the counter, a picture of the town's factory reminded him of simpler days. It had stood tall, a spine for so many livelihoods. Now it lay abandoned, a ghost of what had once been. He felt an ache in his chest as he remembered his friends and neighbors, those who had lost so much and were left to grapple with their own aching truths. That night, his thoughts spiraled. He would have to invite everyone in town, friends, those who had been displaced, the ones who avoided talking about what had happened. As Jim closed his eyes, the faces of Maplewood drifted into view, some warm with memories, others filled with resignation. The next day, he began writing notes. He roamed the streets, handing out flyers, and speaking to anyone who would listen. "Join us for a town meeting," he said earnestly, meeting each gaze with sincerity. "We need to talk, to share our stories." Most nodded, if only out of politeness. Some offered half-hearted smiles, while others averted their eyes like the vulnerability of the subject burned. There were whispers behind his back, though, curiosity, and skepticism mingled like oil and water. The stranger, they thought, would only stir up trouble. But Jim felt it in his gut. Healing began with conversation. Each no fueled his resolve. He imagined the gathering, a patchwork of broken pieces coming together, perhaps the very miracle they needed. As the days passed, he barely noticed how quickly the meeting drew near. With each flyer he handed out, he felt encouraged, but the weight of responsibility grew heavier. His nights turned restless, filled with hesitation. What if the anger simmering beneath the surface erupted? On the eve of the meeting, Jim stood in front of his mirror and practiced. "We're here because we care," he said, words echoing back at him, a mantra of hope and fear. "We can't heal the past, but we can acknowledge it." Just before he turned off the light, he knew he needed Lily's strength around him. He called her, voice steady but nervous. "Will you be there tomorrow?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, her tone a soothing balm. The meeting began to shape itself in his mind. It was no longer just a gathering, it was a lifeline. Then, just as he was closing his eyes, the doorbell rang. It echoed through the silence of the house, loud and startling. Palms sweating, he opened the door to find Sarah, a neighbor from down the road, with tears in her eyes. "They're saying things, Jim, bad things about you. About Lily," she said, her voice trembling. His heart sank. The storm wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was knocking at his door. "Come in," Jim said, ushering her inside, dread pooling in his stomach. "Let us talk." As they settled into the living room, the weight of the conversation shifted. Could he stand firm against their fears, or would he become the catalyst for chaos? The air was charged with potential, and Jim couldn't help but wonder if their stories could truly weave the fabric of unity or just fray it further. Jim sat across from Sarah, the tension thick in the air. She wiped her tears, shoulders hunched, as if the weight of Maplewood rested on them. "What if they blame you for everything? You've stirred up memories they want buried." His heart raced in response. "I just want everyone to talk, to be heard," he insisted, his voice steadier than he felt. "I know," she replied, her gaze dropping to her lap. "But this town, it's built on silence. Those who speak out get hurt." Jim's chest tightened. Would he step forward into the storm, or retreat into the shadows as many before him had? "Then we break that silence," he said quietly, fire igniting within him. "It's time to stop hiding from each other." Sarah met his eyes with uncertainty. "What if talking only makes things worse?" "Talking is the only way to make it better. It's our chance to heal, Sarah." He paused, searching for the right words. "If we don't confront what's broken, we can't fix it." She inhaled deeply, pondering his words. "You might end up being the target, Jim. People hold their pain tightly. But if you truly think this can help, okay, I'll do my part. I'll be there." Jim nodded, grateful for her support, but the worry still gnawed at him. Would this really open the door to healing? Or just unleash the anger that simmered just beneath the surface? Later that night, he scrolled through his contacts, hesitating over names, friends, former acquaintances, people who had drifted away. He sent out a few more messages, inviting them personally. Each beep of his phone sent a thrill of dread through him. What would they say? The next morning, the sun peeked through the curtains, pouring light into the room, filling him with a strange mix of hope and apprehension. Today was the day. He glanced in the mirror, smoothed his hair, and put on a brave face. It was time. Outside, he felt the pulse of the town. Familiar faces passed by, exchanging polite nods. But he also sensed the undercurrents of conversation, the whispers that trailed behind him. What would they think when he stepped in front of them, laid the truth bare? As the hour approached, Jim arrived at the community hall, anxiety weaving through his thoughts. He set up chairs, trying to ignore the knot tightening in his stomach. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint hum of unease. People began to drift in, cautious and unsure. He recognized a few friends, but many wore expressions that told stories of hurt and doubt. They found their seats, glancing at one another like players unsure of their roles. "Thank you for coming," Jim started, his voice shaking slightly. Faces turned toward him, some frowning, others hopeful. "I know this is difficult, but we need to confront what's been left unsaid." Sarah nodded from the crowd, and he drew strength from her presence. The first few words hung in the air, taut like a string ready to snap. Would they listen? Or would they turn their backs? As he spoke, He poured his heart into the words. The factory, the loss, the unspoken pain, all of it blended together in a crescendo of shared experiences. One by one, their eyes began to widen, and tension shifted into something far more palpable. Then suddenly, someone stood up, a familiar face from days gone by. You think you can just walk in here and fix all of this? The familiar opponent's voice cut through the air, low but firm, a challenge simmering with rage. Jim's breath caught. This isn't about fixing. It's about understanding what had begun as a desperate plea for unity was spiraling fast into chaos. Could he balance the delicate threads of trust already fraying around them? Or had he unknowingly lit the fuse to an explosion? An electrifying thought pierced through his mind. Could Jim truly draw out healing from the depths of their wounds? Or was it too late to turn back? Jim felt the heat of every gaze on him, the weight of unspoken words gathering in the room like storm clouds heavy with rain. I understand you're frustrated, he pressed, his heart thundering. But if we keep pretending like everything's fine, nothing's ever going to change. The man, Nate, crossed his arms, defiance written in every line of his face. You don't get it, do you? You didn't live through what we did. You think talking fixes things? It just brings up more pain. Maybe it does, but that's how we start healing, Jim replied, his voice growing stronger. We can't keep moping in silence. We need to be brave enough to face our fears. An uncomfortable silence settled, broken only by a hushed whisper from the back row. But what if it only makes it worse for some of us? A woman stood, her hands trembling as she clasped them in front of her. What if it opens old wounds that will never heal? Jim recognized her immediately. Lila had lost her brother in the factory accident years ago. The whole town had watched as she grieved, yet her pain still lingered as fresh as ever. Lila, I know it's hard. I can't imagine what you've been through, Jim said gently. But your voice matters. We all can't just keep burying our hearts and thoughts when the truth is out there, waiting to be set free. As if waiting for an invitation, murmurs erupted around the room. Some began to nod, their own hidden grievances bubbling just below the surface. One by one, they shared stories, fragments of a shared past that seemed to dance around the truth, but never quite touched it. Jim felt the electricity crackle, a sense of connection forging between them. Maybe we're scared, another voice came from somewhere in the crowd. It was Mike, a man Jim had grown up with, his brow furrowed with worry. Scared of what we might find. Scared of what might happen if we acknowledge the demons that haunt us. That's exactly it, Mike. Jim urged, encouraged by the willingness of others to speak up. We cannot let our fears define us. This town has been paralyzed by pain for too long. Talking is the first step to taking back our lives, our stories. Nate, still standing as the lone dissenting figure, scoffed. And what makes you think your little chat is going to change anything? People are scared, yes, but they're also angry. That anger won't just vanish because you want a group therapy session. A moment's tension snapped, the audience divided. Some supported Jim, others leaned toward Nate's harsh reality. Jim realized they were at the crux of something big. This wasn't just about healing. It was a community grappling with its identity, a turning point. It's not just me, Jim said, gesturing broadly. It's all of you. Every single person here has a story to share. And every story is part of our community. If we can't face it together, we're going to lose everything. And then the room fell silent. Hope and fear wrestled in the eyes around him. Would they choose to embrace the chance to rebuild? Or would they let anger and silence fracture their lives further apart? Just then, the door creaked open, and an unexpected figure stepped inside, the mayor himself, looking as tense as everyone else but determined. What is going on here? He asked sharply, challenging the charged atmosphere with an authoritative tone. Every eye fell on him, and in that moment, the stakes rose higher. Would the mayor support Jim's plea for unity, or would he ally with those who wanted to maintain the status quo? Jim's heart raced as anticipation thickened. This was at the moment that could change everything, and he was at the center of it all. He knew they were teetering on the edge of a much larger conversation. Would they find the courage to step forward into the truth, or retreat back into the darkness of their shared silence? The mayor scanned the room, and the tension felt like a coiled spring ready to snap. Voices murmured, a mix of uncertainty and excitement rippling through the crowd. Jim's heart pounded. This was his moment to either rally the town or watch it fractal into chaos. Stepping forward, Jim found his voice. We're here to talk about our past, our pain, but more importantly, our future. We can't hide from what has happened. The factory's closure affected us all, and it's time we address it together. He watched the mayor, hoping to see a spark of support in his eyes. Talking is good, the mayor replied slowly. But it has to lead somewhere. We don't want to stoke old flames, Jim. His words struck a chord, echoing the fears that simmered within the crowd. What is your plan? Jim took a deep breath, feeling the weight of a community's hope resting on his shoulders. Let this be a starting point, a chance for us all to hear each other's stories. We need to confront our experiences and fears to pave the way for healing. If not now, then when? The mayor regarded him, gauging the room's mood. Then he nodded. But we need to ensure it's constructive. You can't just throw everyone into a room with a box of tissues and hope for the best. There needs to be a structure. Agreed. I think we can host smaller circles afterwards. Create a safe space where everyone can share, Jim suggested, excitement bubbling in his gut. Nate crossed his arms again, a storm brewing in his eyes. And who decides what stories are valid? They're LLB arguments. Emotions run high when you bring up the past. That's why we're here, Jim replied firmly. To give every voice a platform. It's messy, but we have to be willing to embrace that for true healing to happen. This community is full of courage, just waiting to break free. Sarah caught Jim's eye and nodded in agreement, her expression softening. Nearby, Lila's tears flowed anew, albeit with a glimmer of hope. Let us turn our pain into purpose, not our grudges, she said. That a wave of murmured agreement swept through the hall, each voice scratched together like old phonographs spinning unfamiliar songs. But Jim felt the shadows again, the unease creeping back. Placing his hands on the table, he addressed Nate. Look, I get it. You've been hurt, and so have many others. But it's easier to remain in darkness than to brave the light of understanding. The room quieted again as Nate seemed to consider this, the flicker of doubt crossing his face. Letting go of anger means we can finally move forward as a community, Jim continued, the words spilling from him. Don't we owe it to those who came before us, who built Maplewood, to unite and share our stories? Damn right. A voice piped up from the back, a voice like a lifeline, and one by one others joined in. Jim felt the energy shifting, igniting like gasoline. Let us do this, another shouted, and just like that, warmth spread through the crowd like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day. Jim looked around, sensing the collective breath held, now released. They were ready. As the discussion began to unfold, people started to share. Stories emerged from the quiet corners, voices rising in unison. A haunting tale from someone who had lost their father in a factory accident. A comedic turn on a family road trip in a beat-up Pontiac that erupted in laughter, and tales of resilience knotted them closer. Laughter mingled with tears as familiarity began to weave through the fibers of resentment, stitching them together in ways he had hoped for. The heaviness that had settled in their hearts began to lift like fog at dawn, revealing a path toward healing. Then, the door creaked open, and Jim felt his breath catch. The shadowy figure from before stepped in, Lily, holding her head high, her resolve renewed. Each of us carries a weight. Let us share those. The whole room turned to her, the air brimming with possibility. Jim could hardly believe how far they had come in just a few hours. Look at them. They were embracing honesty, trading shame for understanding. Time flowed together past memories blending with present intentions like colors on a painter's canvas. Their hearts were laid bare, truths spoken with defiance, and each breakthrough knit them closer, filling Jim with hope. Nate finally stood, the steel in his demeanor softening. All right, I admit it. I was scared, he said, his voice breaking. I thought if I shared, it would only make the pain worse. No, Jim interjected. Together we transform pain into growth. We're not here to drag you down. We're here to uplift each other. And so, they shared more, healing pouring over them like rain on cracked soil. Each tear shed was a burden lifted, each laugh a thread connecting them. Hours passed, but Jim didn't care. He immersed himself in the catharsis around him, a powerful force lifting them as the past began to lose its grip. Finally, as the meeting wound down, Jim felt a contagious joy radiating, a connection blossoming where once had been division. It wasn't done, it was only the beginning. But they had taken the first step together, As people finally began to leave, gratitude filled the room. Real conversations had been ignited, creating a spark that could no longer be dimmed. Lily caught his eye, pride radiating like sunlight, and he knew there was no turning back. In the midst of the celebration, the shadow of uncertainty still lingered, but it didn't seem quite so daunting tonight. They faced their fears together, and the heart of Maplewood was beating stronger than ever. As the last of the laughter faded into the halls, Jim's heart swelled with the promise of community renewed, resilient, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. Now he understood. They weren't just facing a threat, they were cultivating strength. Could they summon the courage to protect their unity against any lurking dangers? As night fell soft and steady over Maplewood, hope melded with resolve. This was not just the end of a meeting. It was the dawn of a new era, one where stories had the power to unite, even in solitude. Jim looked out at a community reborn, and he knew they could overcome anything as long as they stood together. Now it was time for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and feelings about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait, not even one more second to share. True fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.